President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will travel to the Hawaiian island of Maui today, where they will see firsthand the devastation caused by the wildfires earlier this month.
At least 114 people confirmed dead at this hour, hundreds more still missing. President and First Lady are expected to meet with survivors, also emergency responders, and they're expected to talk about the federal government's pledge to help with the recovery efforts. There is a heightened concern also at this point about the impact that the wildfires are having on the local ecology.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now from the White House. Scott, great to see you. Tell us a little bit more about the president's agenda in Maui when he arrives there later today and what we're expecting to hear from him.
Hey, Meg and Tony, I asked the FEMA administrator what the president would do when he arrived in Maui, and she said get a better understanding of the impact of this unprecedented disaster. He follows the pattern of past presidential visits to disaster zones. He would survey the disaster from the air, then survey it on the ground, get a briefing from officials, both FEMA officials and local officials, then talk to members of the community and, to a degree, be seen talking to members of the community to show the breadth of the federal response. And really, when the federal government responds to disasters of this magnitude, there are so many different agencies that play a role in it, not just direct money to homeowners who are now experiencing homelessness and to the small businesses that lost their businesses, but it's about waiving eligibility to make it easier to get access to food stamps, to make it easier to get access to emergency lodging. There is a scope and size to the federal response the president's going to try to accentuate today. It would be no surprise to hear him speak from Hawaii to the nation at some point before departing.
Now, Scott, earlier in the week when I was in Maui myself, I heard from some local residents, Kai Lenny, the surfer, for example, saying that government of all levels had let the Hawaiian people down. But the criticism I was talking about in the introduction to this was actually criticism of President Biden, not from locals, but from fellow Republicans or from Republicans in Congress who argue the president should have visited sooner than today. What went into the decision to do this visit now? Do the Republicans have a point on this? And how's the White House responding overall to the criticism?
And Tony, this is a perennial issue for presidents, when to get on the ground and avoid being a distraction or an imposition to the rendering of services, and when to get on the ground and avoid looking like you're being sluggish or dispassionate about the issue. The president took some criticism from Republicans for not moving more quickly to get on the ground in Maui, criticized for a lack of a vibrant response, but the FEMA administrator and others in the administration have pushed back on that criticism, saying the president immediately directed aid to get on the ground, immediately put a number of things on the ground, including 1,000 people, millions of dollars, tens of thousands of meals. What's more, Meg and Tony, I think what the federal agencies would emphasize is that they're in a support role, that this is a state first response when there's a disaster in America, and that FEMA comes in to help. The president being on the ground today can also change the optics to a degree and show him being on the ground, intermeshed with this community.
Scott, you mentioned that the Biden administration sent supplies and relief efforts in right away. Looking ahead to the future, what are we looking at in terms of federal funds for recovery efforts going forward?
And Meg, it wouldn't surprise me to hear the president talk about future emergency funding for future disasters. He's already made this request for $40 billion in emergency money from Congress, $12 billion of which would be for the Disaster Relief Fund, the so-called DRF, which has been drained by a number of disasters this year. Other wildfires, floods in Vermont and New York now being taxed by Maui. We expect him to make another push to replenish that fund, and it's a heavy lift right now, even in the name of disaster relief, to get any money through Congress. It'll take some leverage by the president, some pressure to get Congress to move, a stalemated Congress to move on money of any sort.
All right, Scott MacFarlane for us at the White House. Scott, thank you.